Right, in this video I'm going to give a sort of real world use demonstration of the Improviser plugin. So first of all I need to talk you through the setup I've got going here. This is my DAW, I'm using Reaper, but you can do similar things in whatever you use like Ableton or Logic and so on. Right, so first of all, for the first sort of step, what I've got here is a recording of some flute. So we can hear that now. Right, so that could be coming from a live microphone as well, but in this case I've got it pre-recorded because I don't have a flute player handy. And the next step is that on that channel you can see I've got this kind of little set of plugins. Actually, we don't need that one. I'm just going to remove that one. Yeah, so we've got basically this one. This is my polyphonic pitch tracker. Now what this does is you feed it audio and it extracts notes from the audio, so it's a way of getting the data that you need for the improviser, right? So if I press play, you can see it's kind of getting the signal, and it has a bit of a delay, but then eventually you can see that down here are the notes coming out that are being played on the flute. So that's actually MIDI data. So that's sort of turning it into MIDI data. So that's the first bit, basically getting a live input or a pre-recorded audio input and turning that into MIDI, and that's done, yeah, like this with this polyphonic pitch tracker plugin. Okay, so the next step is to then feed that. Well, you can test before we carry on. We can basically hook that up to a synth and just check that it sounds okay, right? So if I turn on this. So what's happening is it's playing the flute, and then it's detecting the notes from the flute, and then a little while later, like half a second later, it's then playing those notes on the Moog. So if I play the flute. Okay, so you get the idea. So that's a way of just verifying that the pitch tracking works. And if you're finding maybe it's too twitchy or whatever, you can fool around with these settings here and try and get a better track on it, because different instruments and different mics and whatever will need different settings. So that's the first step, is to basically get your pitch tracker going if you're working with audio. Okay, so the next thing is, how do we get that into the AI? And so what I've got is the MIDI, which we were watching the MIDI coming through here. So we can take the MIDI that's on this first track and we can then route that into the improviser. So on the second track here, which I'm now going to enable, oh no, not that one, sorry. The improviser's on the third track, which is called Improviser, to give me a clue. And yeah, if I look at the plugins on that one, you can see all I've got is my improviser plugin. Okay, that's just sitting there. And we'll see that if I basically play the audio, you'll say it's kind of indicating that the notes are coming into the AI, and it's producing notes back out again. And so it's we'll get into the details of how this interface works in a minute, but suffice to say that I'm now sending data into the AI and it's learning and doing stuff and generating more MIDI, right? So the next step is, how do we get the MIDI that's so it's coming from the flute into the improviser, which is here, and now we want to get it back out and plug it into a sound. So the way I've done that is I've then routed the MIDI from the improviser back out again, and I've got two more tracks here so I can have different sounds. So I've got a Rhodes sound here, so if I unmute that, I can then have the improviser playing a Rhodes sound. So what's happening is I'm going to play the flute into a pitch tracker. It's turning that into notes, of MIDI notes, which are sent to the improviser. The improviser's listening to it and then playing back out again on a Rhodes sound. So we'll hear a Rhodes kind of accompanying the flute. Okay, and I can stop the improviser from playing at any time by just disabling the playing, and I can disable the learning. So yeah, so that's the improviser playing a Rhodes, and I can also do things like I can then maybe get into the controls on this. But before I do that, let's just see. You know, I've got it routed also to a Moog sound, so we can just quickly hear that as well, possibly. Oh, not sure why I'm not hearing it. Oh, because the AI is not playing, of course. Obviously, you can, and then you can stack up your sounds if you want. They're playing the same notes, but okay. So yeah, let's stick with the Rhodes for now. It's a bit cleaner to hear what it's doing. Okay, so that's that. Now, yeah, let's now look at this interface actually. So there's lots of controls on here, and it kind of looks a bit daunting. So for now, I mean, if you just want to play freely into it, you can probably just ignore this whole BPM section for now. But this does allow you, if you're playing stuff that's to a click track and stuff like that, it can sync in with the click coming from the main DAW, so it can actually sync to the clock on the DAW, or you can also quantize what it's doing. So even after the fact, so if we set it playing, so if I enable this. So it's now quantizing the output to whatever I've set the BPM to. And if I in fact, I'm going to show you. So if I actually enable my metronome and I start playing, and I set that to host, so if you can hear, it's on more like semi-quavers. Okay, you get the idea. So that's how that works, but you can kind of fool around with that if you want, or you can just have it playing freely like it is now. And in that case, it kind of constructs its own sort of rhythm from whatever you've played into it. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, the next thing is that you have these load and save models. So they're kind of self-explanatory. So if you click save, it will give you basically a version of the model that you can save out. So I can save it onto my desktop, so I can say, you know, flute 1, whatever, and it will tell you, it'll flash until it's done. So the models, once they're saved, are not too big because it kind of compresses them down, but yeah, they can have quite a lot of data in them, so it takes a little while to load and save. So that's the models, and you can load that back in again and have it do that. You can also reset the model, which clears everything that's in there, and then you've got some other bits over here. So this is just a description of the size of the model. So yeah, the bigger those numbers are, the more data you have in the model. Obviously, when you hit reset, those go back down to 0, and it's now got nothing in it, so you'd have to retrain it. So we can do that. So it's learning in real time from what's coming in off the flute now, and then immediately playing out of that model back out onto the Rhodes, which is pretty cool. Okay, so what about these other rack of interesting looking buttons here? Well, so these are what I would call kind of clockworkish behaviours. So because I didn't want to just have the raw model just generating however it wants, and I wanted to provide a bit more interesting control, so that's what these buttons are for. So you've got two major modes. You've got lead and follow mode. In lead mode, the AI does not listen to what you're playing now. It's learning from what you're playing, but when it generates, it's not listening. It's only generating from its own model. So it kind of seems to respond to you, but technically it's only responding to its own itself. Yeah, although that self is learned off of you, so it's kind of a bit weird. So it's like, imagine someone who's like listening to you and learning from you, but then coming up with his own riffs from what you're playing. So that's lead mode. If you disable that, so if you put it in follow mode, then it's learning from you if the learning is on, but it's also responding directly, like with the model, to what you're playing. So technically speaking, you know, the context or the prompt, if you like, in that language that's going into the model is based on what you just played. So you know, the bigger the model, the more you'll notice this, I think, because, you know, a large model, if you let a large model lead, then it will just be generating from whatever it wants, whatever it's learned. Whereas if you make it follow, it will try and stick a bit closer to you. That's the idea. Okay, then you've got a void. So a void mode is essentially pushes it up or down an octave or two to avoid the range that you're playing in, so that it appears to be more of an accompaniment. So if I put that on, so you can hear now the number that it shows you. So it's decided to go down an octave from what you're playing. So it makes a decision. If you're playing really low, it will go high, and if you play low, it will go high. High, it will go low. Okay, so if I turn that off, you can hear now. So they're playing in the same range, register rather. But if I enable it, the AI jumps down. Okay, so that's the avoid feature. So the next one is the slow-mo, which is not very good. Basically, it's a bit like avoid, but in terms of time. So it sort of adjusts its timing to kind of avoid your timing style. So I think in this case, it's deciding on the multiplier is how much slower it plays. So it's basically playing, you know, depending on if you play fast, it just kind of slows down more or less. Anyway, it just gives it a bit of variation from what you're playing, but I found that's not that interesting myself, that one. It was just an idea. This one's a bit more interesting. Over poly. So over poly is really useful if you're working, let's just, turn it off for a minute. If you're working with a monophonic instrument like the flute, but you want the accompaniment to be polyphonic, so playing more than one note at a time, then the over poly allows it to do that. So what it does is it pulls multiple notes from the model each time instead of just one, and that way essentially they are notes that you've played, but they're just stacked up into chords instead. So you'll see that is, so if you combine that with a void, you get quite a nice kind of accompaniment. So let's try that and press play. So I think that's pretty cool. So you can see it doesn't feel like it's just kind of mimicking you anymore. It's staying in key with you because it's kind of like it's trained on your notes, but the way it constructs that into a pattern is quite different. So in that one we were avoiding, so it was going down an octave, plus we were sort of making, if you like, fake polyphony from what you're playing. Now, the last mode to know about is this one. So this is the kind of call and response mode, and what this is aiming to do is to essentially work in a call and response style. So it listens to you, and then when you stop playing, it starts playing. So let's have a try with it. So I'll play some flute into it. Now if I stop, And while the flute's going, it tries to keep a bit quiet. As soon as the flute stops, it suddenly cuts in. But it's kind of a subtle effect. It's quite dynamic and, you know, a bit unpredictable. And you can do things to kind of vary the sensitivity. So you can say, well, don't wait very long before you cut in. So in this case, and what you'll also notice is each response that it generates, it kind of flicks on some of these modes in different ways. So it switches on over poly and avoid at random. So sometimes it responds with over poly on and avoid on, sometimes it doesn't. So it gives it a lot more dynamic kind of variation. So it's quite an interesting mode, and it allows you to feels more interactive, if you like. And that's basically it. The other thing I wanted to show quickly is just, you don't have, obviously this, like I say, this audio could be a live microphone. So if you just, enable recording and then have that playing through, then it would just respond to the live mic, and you can pretty much feed any instrument and the polyphonic pitch tracker should pick it up. Only one instrument at a time normally, but yeah, you could have multiple mics, each with their own pitch tracker, and then you could have multiple instruments coming in, possibly. So there's that. But you can also feed in MIDI, obviously. So this is the classic mode, where, so here I have basically some MIDI data. So if we have a listen to that, first of all, I'm going to mute off all of these. The aptly titled Hallucinations, you may recognise if you're a jazz fan. Okay, so this is I should know who this is who's playing this, but I don't because I've forgotten. Anyway, so there you go. So it's a piano MIDI of Hallucinations and the track. So yeah, we can of course learn off of that as well. So if I reset the model, and this one is also sending through the same channel. So if I reset the model and just have it, I'm going to turn off. Oh, maybe I forgot to hook this one up. Oh yeah. So if I just send this one over to the improviser and we go audio only. Okay, right, so that's working. So you probably don't need, fake polyphony when you're learning off a piano like this. But we can put some of these things on. We can put it in avoid mode. So you can see avoid is dynamically changing, so sometimes it's going up one, sometimes it's going down one, just trying to keep out of the way of the piano, which is obviously quite difficult because it's pretty all over the place. But we could also put it in call and response mode, and then because the piano is continually playing it, the AI keeps quiet. As soon as we stop, so you get the idea. So this is learning from this piano piece from scratch, so it hasn't learnt much yet, so that's why the responses are a little bit all over the place. But the more I play this in, the more it's learning, so the better the responses are going to get. So if we wait, look. Quite interesting though, because it's avoiding, it's being, it's being complementary in a way. So if we turn all that off, we can just hear, this is the model just generating, listening to itself. If we give it, listen to yourself, and just, you can see it's actually, it's got a half decent model, it's only heard it for like a minute. And then we can get it to... Okay, you get the idea. So that's basically the model learning from some sort of quite complex MIDI input in real time and generating back out again. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And so it's really, this is very much a demo of how it might be used in a sort of real world like gig or something, and how I'm going to be using it in an upcoming gig, for example, of having different sounds and different ways of working with it. So yeah, very hands-on, real world. There you go.